everyone. Welcome back to the Actionable podcast. Today we have Sammy Bohannon, the founder of Bohannon Virtual Solutions, who helps service-based online business owners streamline their teams. After starting as a BA in 2022, Sammy quickly realized that her expertise extended beyond the typical BA tasks, leading to her transformation to becoming an OBM in 2024. With a dedicated team, Sammy empowers entrepreneurs to confidently scale their business with clarity and ease, and while reclaiming their name and achieving sustainable growth without the overwhelm. Now, I'm so excited. I just hopped off the call with Sammy, and this is one of the podcasts that you do want to take down notes. I actually did take a lot of notes. So I suggest that if you are sitting down or if you're comfortable, get a pen and paper because you're going to need it.
Welcome to the Actionable podcast. I'm Minty, and here we'll talk about business, freelance, mindset, education, mental health, life, personal growth, and everything to help you overcome your fears, know yourself, and create the life and career of your dreams. Episodes in English and Spanish every week.
Okay, Sammy, thank you for coming to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on. I'm excited.
I'm so excited. Now, Sammy, if someone who doesn't know who you are just tuned in right now and they never heard of you, they don't know what an OBM is or how they can help their business grow, why should they stick around and listen to you?
Yeah, well, I have a lot of experience from a lot of different fields and businesses and services. I started my career as a teacher, then I moved into my own online business as a tutor, and then from there I made the transition to VA. And as a VA, I have worked with people in a variety of businesses, and I've kind of seen just like a general what works and what doesn't because of all the business owners I've worked with. And I've got some insights and some things I can share to help get your business organized and help manage your team and maybe manage your time a little better.
I love that. Now, you mentioned variety of business. Can I ask you what's that variety look like? Are we talking like solopreneurs, medium-sized companies, big companies? What's your usual client look like?
Yeah, my typical client is a solopreneur or a small team, but I have worked with companies that range up into mid-size. I've worked with a company that has an energy company with several different departments and at least 100 employees. I worked with an HVAC company, again, who had about 100 employees. But I've also worked with copywriters. I work with a lot of tutors because I tend to really connect with them from my teaching background. But I've also worked with in-person businesses. I worked for a couple of years with a gutter company. And, so I've worked with a lot of different people doing different things. I've worked with course creators. I've worked with people in real estate, and I've just picked up a lot along the way.
Wow. Such a great variety. Like, I was asking about variety, and I feel like that's the ADHD thing. Like, you can grab onto new things and just learn super quick and on the go. Like, do you actually enjoy working with different clients? Do you feel like that fulfills you in a way to do different things and have different size companies and all that? Because for myself, I want to say yes. As a copywriter, I'm like, I'll take anything. I mean, of course, I have my niches that I love, but I'm not going to lie. I like to have a day that doesn't look the same for me ever. But at the same time, I struggle a lot with time management because ADHD and, my organizational skills are all over the place. So I do want to ask you about it. Like, how do you handle that? But do you think that's related at all?
Oh, yes. I think it's very much related. I am with you. I do not like things to stay the same. As a matter of fact, we were just talking the other day. My kids were asking me why we've moved so much. We've moved a lot. And it's just because I get bored and I don't like to stay in the same place. And I like to go new places and do new things. Yeah.
Me too.
So we try to have a schedule for every day, but we keep it very flexible because I might wake up and decide, hey, let's go shopping this morning instead, and I'll just work this afternoon. And I like to keep things flexible. I don't like to work with the same people. I do like to work with the same people long term, but I like being able to work with different niches and different companies and different sizes and just having different challenges. I don't want to have the same thing all day long.
Oh my gosh, I feel you. And being someone, before I started working for my own business and building my own business, I worked at a Fortune 500 company, and most of my jobs were like very corporate, like big companies. And it's crazy how, and I actually talked about this with Nikki the other day. Like, I learned way more doing things for myself and for, startups and solopreneurs than at these big companies. So it's good to have both things because you can take on, like, let's say there's a few things that of course I learned from the way that they manage their time in big companies, like, the Kaizen method, all of that, which is good that you can bring in. But then at the same time, you see it like how a solopreneur works or how a small business or a startup is working. It's so different. And it's crazy how you can, when you work with those people, it's like you can bring, oh, this worked here, this worked here, this worked here. And then you can develop your own way of working. And for you being an OBM, I feel like probably you benefited a lot from that. Am I wrong there, or is that gut feeling working?
So I definitely think that I have benefited from working with people all over the place and just in all kinds of different areas, because I'm able to take what works for one person and what works for someone else and bring it into a new idea for someone who has struggled to find anything that works for them, or who doesn't like what the business guru is saying that week that they should follow. And then I'm able to help them figure out what does work for them.
I love that. Yeah, me too. And it's great because it allows you also not to get bored. It's like, oh, I can work at this big company, and then I can work with this solopreneur, and then I can also work for this, I don't know, like a startup that goes super, super fast, and a medium-sized company. Like, it's so great to do that because you take all of the learnings from all of these different places and you can use it for yourself. Now, for someone listening who doesn't know the difference between a VA and an OBM, because I want to get into time management and everything that you do. But before we move on, I would like to know, because I'm still struggling to understand the two difference. And I know it's very different one from another, but for someone who doesn't know, how could you explain it?
Yeah, so I think part of the problem is a lot of times there are some high level well, there are a lot of high level VAs who are really doing OBM work, and that's kind of what happened to me. But a VA is someone who does the work. They are given a task that already has a procedure and or already has set expectations, and they're completing that task the way it's supposed to be done. An OBM is more going to come in and help create the procedure or create the system, is going to help you kind of uphaul your tech. They're going to help you figure out what's working and what's not. And they have more of a say in the business, more say in the day to day. And they also do a lot of making sure everyone else is doing their part. So an OBM is more like a partner who doesn't have a stake in your business, who helps oversee things and does more of the business tasks that help move the business forward, whereas a virtual assistant is doing the implementing and they're not really helping with the strategy. They don't typically give a lot of their opinion on what should change or what shouldn't, or they don't have a lot of say in those things typically. Like I said, there are some VAs who do that stuff, but that's when they're kind of on the line between VA and OBM.
I get it. And for someone listening who is growing their company and they do need a bit of help with, managing everything in the business, I feel like it sounds a bit like a project manager, but a bit more than a project manager. Am I right?
Yes, I definitely do a lot of project management, and so do the other OBMs that I know, but it's a little more than a project manager. A project manager just works on the project management side of things. And then what I do is I do that plus I help build the systems, plus I help make decisions, and I take a look. I'm not a bookkeeper and I don't make recommendations based on things, but I do like take a look at the books and say, hey, maybe we should try this or that, or maybe we should talk to a bookkeeper. But I do a lot of the things that kind of make decisions in the business as well.
Love that. Now, for someone listening, if they have a small business and they're like, I need help with my processes, my systems, when do they know and how should they know whether they need a BA or an OBM? Like, let's say, for me, for example, I'm just all over the place. I need some help, but I don't know. How do I know it? Should it be a BA, an OBM, a project manager?
Yes. Okay. So that really depends on every person. Not the answer you're looking for, but I will explain a little bit. I always suggest that people make a list of what they need help with. And it is tedious and time consuming, but it's the best way to really think it through. So I suggest that people make a list. And if it's things like email management, inbox management, organizing the inbox, or file management, or communicating with customers, things that you can very easily show someone how to do it and they can do that. That is more of a VA thing. And you may need multiple VAs to do different things, but those are more of VA things. And then if you're looking and you're saying, okay, I really need someone to help me with this one launch or this one project, that's going to be a project manager. So there's somebody who comes in on a one-time basis, or, it can be extended time, but it's usually for one particular thing. They don't usually, not typically, and that's not always true. But in my experience, a project manager comes on for maybe like 6 months or up to a year to help with one or two little projects or big projects. And then they move on to somebody else. An OBM is more of like a long-term partner to help you streamline things. So if you need help building the processes, if you say, I really need a better way to onboard clients, that's something a VA can help you develop. If you say, or not a VA, I'm sorry, an OBM can help you develop that. If on your list is, I need a better system for when we onboard them, what do we do, and who's going to oversee making sure everybody is doing their part, because the VA has a part, and maybe the marketing manager has a part, and the business owner has a part, and then there's a part somebody else needs to fill in, the OBM is going to come in and help you do that stuff. So depending on what you need is how you're going to decide who's going to help you with that.
Oh, I feel it. Yeah, I get it now. For me, this is also new because I was stuck with the BA and then the project manager, but then the OBM for me is like a complete new thing that I never heard of. So it's really interesting to hear it from you. Now, I do want to ask you something. As you were talking and you were talking about building systems, I feel like she may have her own blueprint to build system, because I feel like everybody has their own way of working. Like if you ask me for marketing or for copywriting, I have my own blueprint, the way that I work with my clients. And I feel like we all do that at some level within our niche or within our industry. Do you have your own blueprint, something that you're like, this is the best way to build a system, to organize your business? If you can share that, or you want to share a few tips, that would be great.
Yeah, well, actually, I do not. I think that business, in order for it to work, needs to be highly personalized. So, what I'm doing for one client, I am not doing for another client, because it has to fit the client in order for the client to buy into it and to want to continue using it. Because I have found that if I come in and do what I do in my business, it may not work for the client. And then 2, 3 months down the road, everyone's frustrated. We have to start all over. So what I've really done is I built my onboarding system so that I can really get to know my clients, what's important to them, what do they like, what do they not like, and then kind of build it from there. So for example, project management. I have one client who is a diehard Asana fan. Like that's not, I don't hate Asana, but it's not my favorite, but that's what they like. So we have built systems and things that work for her based on Asana, because that's what she likes and what she's comfortable with. I prefer list, where she prefers the Kanban boards. So I wouldn't want to tell her we have to do lists, because that's not how her brain works. So really, I just take a lot of time to to know my clients and then figure out what's going to work for them. For some people, I was just talking to a potential client the other day. They absolutely hate project management tools, and they have to find another way to make things work. And that's okay. So it's really about getting creative and figuring out, and there is a little trial and error in there, but it's about figuring out what exactly is going to work. And I never want to say that there's one certain way that you should do things, because that's just not true. Another example I have is that all of the business people have said, your onboarding process should be 100% automated. Well, when I get a new lead, I like to send a personalized video, because that's something that I would want as a client of someone paying so much money, like I would want to know that that person is aware that I signed up. So I send that out, and that has been like not at all recommended because it takes you so much time. I mean, it takes me 5 minutes, if that. But so you have to figure out also what works with your values. So I also consider some of my onboarding questions are like, what are your values? What are your core values? What are your values as a person versus as a business? So that we can work that into their systems as well. And one in mine is that the client always comes first. And that is why I do send those personalized videos. But that's not, that doesn't work for everybody. And that's fine. And some people get a ton more leads than I do, which is how their business is supposed to be. Mine isn't supposed to get 100 leads a day. So it really just depends on what the business looks like. And I know that's not like the greatest answer everyone wants to hear, but also the relief I see on people's faces when I say we can make it work for you and we will figure out what works for you is just it's wild how relieved people feel when they learn I'm not going to make them do something to work with me.
Wow, I love that. And it makes a lot of sense. Now, maybe the question was a bit off because it's not like, it's not like you have a blueprint for everyone and you use the same structure for everyone, because it'll depend heavily on the business. It'll depend on the type of product. For me, marketing like will be product, service based, B2B, B2C, DTC, whatever. But what I'm trying to say is like, yeah, maybe you have your way of working that works. Like, okay, yeah, I like to hop on calls. I feel like this usually works, but I feel like, yeah, like you say, it depends on the team, it depends on the business, it depends on the client, their preferences. Now, you mentioned something that to me just like, it's project management tools. I hate them too. I'm exactly like your client, although I do love to use my calendar. That's why my calendar is a mess, because I use a lot of time blocking, and I like to use Notion because it's free and I love it, and I like to see the tables where you can like drag and drop things. But like when you're working within a team and then you have so many people chiming in and then you need to collaborate, I feel like that is where things get a little complicated, at least for me. Like I've worked with Asana, I've worked with ClickUp, I've worked with Monday, and I'm just like, oh, I know you said you hate Asana. I found that one to be the easiest one, at least for my brain. But now I just want to ask you, like, what are your favorite time management tools? If you want to share that with someone, like something that's easy, affordable for someone just getting started, who's like maybe watching this because they need help with their systems and they're like, I really need to find a way to make this work and I don't know how to get started. What would you recommend?
Yeah, if we're looking for easy, I would recommend Asana. I personally use ClickUp, but you have to be very comfortable with tech in order to use ClickUp. I mean, you can use it as a simple list very easily, but if you don't know what you're doing, it's easy to get lost and confused in ClickUp because there are so many different things you can do. So I do recommend Asana for people who are not super strong with tech and want to get started in a project management system, because it can do quite a bit of things, and almost anything that most people that I work with are going to need it for, they can do for free. So I do recommend that. And as far as time management, I also time block my calendar. I don't always stick to it, but I do time block my calendar and I do highly recommend that. And then for solopreneurs who are not ready for a project management system or just can't, I see that a lot of people with ADHD really struggle to wrap their head around project management systems because they forget to check it, or they don't know how to make it a priority in their business, partially because it's not something they've done since day one. It's totally valid. It's totally valid. I mean, I'll be honest. I use ClickUp, but sometimes I struggle to remember to look every single day. It's not top of your brain if you don't make it top of your brain. So Google Workspace actually has like a to-do list with tasks, and you can schedule them with time and it will go onto your calendar that way. So I do also recommend that. So you can add a task, you can put a day and a time in there, and I do recommend trying to use Google and looking at all the things that Google can do. Google can do a lot more than what people know it can do.
Oh yeah, I recently figured out that Google has a new feature that's like Calendly. I'm like, why
Yes.
should I be paying for Calendly?
Exactly. I knew it had it, but I hadn't used it yet. Was it you that I used it with?
Yes, it's
Yeah, it
great.
was great.
Yeah, I love it. Now, and I didn't know the thing about Google Tasks. Like I used it before, but it was more like a sticky note thing. I didn't know that now it had the capacity to maybe block time or add it to your calendar. That's great. And now I want to ask you because I never used it. Can you also tag other people within Google Tasks? Like if you have other members in the team, like does it have a limit?
I don't know if you can tag other people. I've never tried that,
Okay, that's something
so
I
I'm
want
not sure.
to look into because it's really interesting. Now, management tools aside, that's like I feel like it's very personal, and it will depend on the person and their needs and the business and the type of business as well, and how many people are working in the business. Because I feel like some are prepared to have like many collaborators, and others aren't. Now, when it comes to you also mentioned a lot of and off camera we were talking about team management. Now, what are some of your favorite tools or what you see people are using nowadays besides, of course, Slack? Everybody uses Slack. Is there any other channel that people use to communicate that you're seeing it's on the rise, or are we all sticking with Slack?
I think it really depends on the needs of your team. I personally prefer Slack. ClickUp did just come out a couple months ago, if it's even been that long, with a new chat feature that is really good for teams that use ClickUp. My biggest issue with it is that if you are not in that workspace and you work with multiple workspaces, you don't get the notifications for the chat. So I have 3 clients who work in ClickUp. If I'm not in their ClickUp, I don't get the notifications that they sent me a chat. And so I have missed things, and that's why we have decided not to use that. But I've seen several teams where that's the only workspace they have, and it's working out really great. So if you're already using ClickUp and that option is there, I do like it. It's just it's not working for my team because we have multiple workspaces. But other teams, I've seen teams use the Google Chat feature, and then they just keep everything in Google, and they create different spaces for their team members, things like that. And that seems to work really well. And then it's really easy if you use Google Workspace to upload any documents or anything else like that that you've got. That's really great. Um, but Slack seems to be the overall favorite.
Yeah, it's mine. I mean, it's easy to use. It's you
Yeah.
can add various clients in there, so it's easy. I love it. Now, you talking about people, team management, working with other people. Like, do you have any tips for team management? Because we were talking this about this off camera, and you were very big on team management, and I want to. I hate this phrase. I was gonna say pick your brain. I just hate that phrase, but like, I just want to pick your brain on team management. Like how do you manage to come and save a team? Because I imagine that some of your projects, if it's not like a long term retainer, maybe people can like if I needed help with my processes, I be like, hey Sammy, I need you to just like come help me with this and find a good way to work with my team, like find what works for us, because everything is like all over the place. We just need some guidance and some organization. So you chime in, you help us, and then once you see that everything is running smoothly, you can move on to the next client or your next clients. Is that something you do?
Yeah, it's not something I do a lot of. Most people who come to me are looking for more long-term support, but that's not a requirement. There are people who need just exactly like what you said, and that is definitely an option. And then I would come in and build out the processes and kind of give you advice and guide you on how to continue the momentum with your team. So, and then we would document everything that we do. So, how is your team going to do this? Where are we going to house it so your team has access? And then, how are you going to continue building those relationships with your team? And then I think part of the question was also like, how do I manage that and get to know everyone? I like to have at least a 15-minute one-on-one meeting with as many people as possible so that I can get to know them on, what do they do? What is important to them? What are their values? How does that match with the company or the business values? And then kind of work that stuff into how we're working. I was talking with someone recently where there's this big thing in business, especially big business, that business is business, it's not personal. And that's not true at all. Everybody who comes in has something going on. They are a person, and people just want to be treated like human beings. So that's a big part of my leadership style is creating relationships, getting to know people, and then focusing on like what people do best and what works for them.
Yeah. And those are the clients you don't want to work with. I mean, I'm thinking from my experience as a copywriter and marketer, even as a fractional CMO, it's just like when they treat you as a number or like they know you're going through something really hard, and they're just not helping out or they're not listening to you and they're expecting you to, clock in the same hours or give your 100%, then it's like you either keep working with them because how they're treating you, or you know that it's time to let go because one, you're not going to give your 100%, and then two, you don't want to work with people that don't align with your vision and your mission because you're also your own business as well. And it's like, yeah, you choose who to work with. Now,
Yeah.
have you ever encountered, if you want to share, of course, any business that was like maybe treating people like that, and were you able to change that or solve that? And if so, how did you do it?
The only time I have worked with a business that was like that, I was not in the OBM role. That was when I was a virtual assistant and I didn't have much of a say. And I didn't last very long. So I don't have a
Mhm.
good answer to that. And I think part of that is because as I have transitioned into OBM work, I have been very specific in who I work with and making sure that their values align with my values. Because I no longer want to go into those businesses. So I make sure that I don't, because it's really hard to change someone's mindset who has a mindset like that.
Yeah, I feel you. Now, you're talking about that. So, what's your process to find out if a client is a fit for you? Like, for people listening, and this will be helpful for everyone out there with the business, whether they're another OBM like you, or a BA, or someone with their own business, or a marketer, whoever it is. Like, because you're good at systems, right? Maybe what's your system to like reach out to clients and make sure are they the right fit for me? Like, do we share the same values? Do I want to work with you? Do you want to work with me? Like, how do you usually tackle that?
I'm an internet stalker. I will admit it. And you should be too. You should be too.
Yeah.
I have a checklist of things that I look for. I look at their personal and professional Facebook pages. I look at their personal and professional LinkedIn and Instagram, everything. I look at their website. I look for client reviews and anything that anyone can say about them on the internet. Make sure that there's nothing like untoward or that makes me uncomfortable. That screams this is not somebody you want to work with. So I do a lot of research before I even meet with the person once they book a call. And then when we do meet, I have a list of questions that talk about like what are your values and what is your vision and where do you see your business going and what do you see this relationship being and what is your leadership style. So it's really getting to know people. It's not so much important to me to know what kind of work you want done because I know I can do the work. It's important for me to know, can we work together and are we going to be able to build something together where our ideas are not completely and totally crashing.
Yeah, I love that. Actually, I love what you said. I'm an internet stalker because I am too. And now I want to ask you that I feel like because I need to know, how do you find out like if people said something about the company like other, because I'm trying to think, is like all I can think of is Glassdoor, to be honest. Is there any other site people can actually, well, maybe if it's like a cafe, then you will go to like Yelp and I don't know, Google reviews, but it's still not the
Yeah,
same.
people leave their reviews on Google. People leave their reviews on Facebook. They'll put them on their Facebook pages. If people are not happy, they will put their reviews wherever they can. So Facebook is a good place to find reviews. LinkedIn, just seeing if people are generally talking about them, is a good place to find out things. And then I also go to Facebook and I search their name and I search their business name and I do some other things. And then I look at posts from the last year or two and see if anybody has posted anything about them.
A few months ago, I remember I received a message on LinkedIn from someone who was going to work at one of the agencies that I worked with in the past. And she was like, I just want to I want to know how it's like working here. Would you recommend it? And I'm like, wow, that's so clever. I never thought of it, but like that makes a lot of sense to like ask people who worked there in the past, probably maybe not who are working there right now, because they're probably like, if they're working there right now, maybe they're like, yeah, I don't know if I just want to share everything, but like maybe that's another thing you could add. I was just thinking, and for myself too, like, because in the end, you just want to save yourself like the headache of working with a client you don't want to, and going through the whole process of like, you onboarded the client, you did the work, and now you're like, I don't want to work with you anymore.
Yeah, no one wants to work with a client they can't work with. And I think that's genius. I think that is genius.
You said, what's your leadership style? And I'm like, how do you know your leadership style? Like, let's say someone just starting or has a small business and they don't have like, too many employees or freelancers working for them. How do they know their leadership style?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of types, and there are definitely some specific types you can get into if you look on the internet. But really, I want to know, like, how do you lead? Do you lead by example? Do you, how do you assign tasks? Are you just assigning them and then expecting people to know? Do you follow up? What does that look like? How do you build relationships with the people who work with you? Are you all business? Do you have like a place where you can chat about what you do on the weekends? Do you how do you handle if someone is sick and can't come to or can't do their work? What is the procedure for, so that kind of is what I'm looking for, and how you handle things that come up and, that may not be ideal, but obviously come up in the workplace, and how people are going to be treated in regards to that.
That made me think like handling conflicts. Is that something that OBMs also handle?
A lot. I don't know about other OBMs, but yes, I handle conflicts a lot. A lot of people have come to me and said, hey, I need you to write an email about this client who hasn't paid, or I have this client who's not happy. Can you help me, manage that, because they're really uncomfortable with it. So a lot of people do come to me for that. I had somebody who had someone who hadn't paid them for a long time, and they wanted help trying to figure out how to say that kind of stuff, and
So your
how
client
to,
was asking you to do that.
yeah,
Wow.
to handle that. So I don't know that everyone does that, but it is something I will do for clients. Yes.
Yeah, it makes sense. That's a great. Also, yeah, I feel like sometimes I'm like, gosh, I'm a copywriter, and sometimes it happens to me like, late payment, and it's never too late, but it's like late payment, and like I know exactly what's right, but it's just, if I had someone else in the middle do that, like some people find it harder to like, just like reach out and say, ask for something. And I feel like I'm definitely one of those people, like, not have that big of a personality and be like, hey, you owe me, or like, hey, payment is due. And even though I'm like a copywriter and I could be really persuasive and I do it for my clients, I'm like, when it comes to me, then it's like, that's when it would be nice to have someone else in the middle. So it's like, oh, she said it, but it's like, yeah, I don't know. But it's interesting that's one of the things that you do. I didn't know that fell under the purview of what you do.
Yeah, and like I said, I think it depends on the OBM. I would say there are some people who won't do it, because some people don't like the confrontation, but I don't. I'm really good with words after being in education for so long. I'm really good at making things sound different than how some people make them sound, and making things sound a little friendlier. So people do ask me to help with that sometimes. I had a course creator once who had someone who was trying to get a free month and they weren't happy and they wanted out of the membership, but they wanted to stay longer. And, I had to write an email based on this is what the contract says, all those sort of things. So it does happen. And then some people do like having that business manager. They're like, hey, this is what my business manager said. So that way they feel like they're not the ones being mean because that's just not in their nature. So
Yeah, I feel them. I feel them. Now that's interesting. And we talked about this off camera as well, like you being a teacher and how you bring what you learned to your business. And this is a great example. Like if you want to maybe give a few examples or how teaching helped you with your business and how it's helping you right now.
Yeah, so I guess one thing, if we want to stay on what we've been talking about, is how to make things sound differently than they are. In teaching, you're constantly, it's definitely a customer service job. It's not supposed to be, but it's definitely a customer service job. So when you reach out to a parent with an issue, you can't just say, hey, your kid did this, and this is, you have to be very gentle about it, especially if kids are failing, which I experienced a lot in my particular role. And so finding ways to reach out and explain things that are happening and things that are difficult to talk about in unique and caring ways. One thing I always did was start with at least one positive, no matter what's going on. And I try to keep the balance of positive to negative like equal. Some people will say you should have 3 positives for every negative. With some people, that's not possible. So I try to keep it one positive for every negative. And that's one thing that I've brought over. Another thing that I've brought over is being able to pick up technologies very quickly. Pretty much every time we had a staff meeting, there was a new technology we had to learn, and we had to learn it on our own. There was no training. It was like, oh, here is this. You're expected to start with it in 2 days, figure it out. And so that helped me figure out technologies very quickly. And I've been able to pick up a lot of things very quickly. And then also just kind of how to treat people. I worked mostly with kids. Well, I worked only with kids who spoke English as a second language, and they needed someone who was very willing to get to know them and understand them on a deeper level because their other teachers weren't willing to do it. They also didn't have the time. I had 20 kids in my class and they had 30 or 40, so it was a little easier for me to do, but also my students came to me for everything. They depended on me. And just learning how to get to know them and their families on a deeper level without going out of the scope of professionalism was a skill that I have brought into owning my business. Like, how am I going to get to know my clients and what motivates them and what's important to them without going outside of the scope of professionalism has been a really big skill that has been extremely helpful.
Wow. You're saying that, and another skill that is super powerful, and I feel like I struggle a lot with, and I could use your insights, is time management. And because I don't want to keep it super long, because I want this podcast to be super practical for people listening. Now, I do want to talk about this skill, time management, because I feel like so many of us struggle with it, especially people with ADHD, people running businesses because they have to be on top of everything. So the business, the service, if they're maybe they're offering a service, the service or the product development, and then the people working in the business. It's like it's a lot. It's a lot, and I see it with some of my clients, and sometimes I'm like, "Ooh, I don't know if I want to be you." And then I look at my business, and I'm like, "I don't know if I want to be me." So, what are your top tips for time management?
Okay, my top tips for time management is to set your non-negotiables. And that sounds a little silly, but my non-negotiable is that I'm going to have at least 1 day a week where I focus only on my business. And I set that in my calendar and I block everything else out. No one can schedule with me. I do not make myself available. And then I also set my emails on those days to let people know that it's going to be longer for me to get back to them. And then my team knows that I have very slow communication on that day.
Sorry, I need to stop you right there. This is probably my most toxic trait of all. Now, you say you have one day for your business. Do you have one day for yourself? And I'm only
No,
asking because I don't. Oh, you don't too. Oh,
I
okay.
don't. But where I homeschool and I do everything, my schedule is a little different than most people's. I work on average about 4 or 5 hours a day. And then I spend the rest of the time working with my kids. So that means that I usually work on weekends too, because I'm working anywhere from 3 to 5 hours every day, which isn't really a full work day. So we kind of work it in. And then my husband is home on the weekends, so that makes it easier for me to get uninterrupted work done. Because even though my children should be old enough to get their own snacks, they struggle with that. And being interrupted constantly, especially as someone with ADHD, is a struggle for me. So, um, yeah, I try to work a certain amount of time each day, and then I spend the rest of the time doing what I need to do for me. And that means that I have to work weekends so that I don't have to work 8 hours every day.
Makes sense. We're on the same path, girl. Like sometimes I just don't want to work 8 hours. And I end up working more because when I finish work for my clients, I'm doing this stuff, which is for me, and then
Yeah.
working on my business. So it's like it never ends. And then you have to, cleaning the house and cooking. And I don't have children, but I have my mom who's sick, and so like taking care of my mom is like it never ends. And then social life and your friends, and it's just it never ends.
No, it really doesn't. Yeah,
Okay.
it doesn't.
But besides from all of that, I do feel like you have more tips on time management, and I want to hear that because I will probably be using some of your tips.
Yeah. So another tip for time management that I have is set 1 or 2 days a week for meetings. Because what I have found myself and what I see other business owners doing is if you're allowing yourself any meeting any time of the week, when you get scheduled for a meeting, at least the 2 hours before and at least an hour after, all you can think about is that meeting. And
Oh
it's
my
highly
gosh. Yes, 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 Sammy. Oh my gosh. And I'm like, when I created the thread, I think you came from there from threads.
distracting. Yeah.
It kind of it's not like it went super viral, but it kind of went viral, and so many people started booking for the podcast. And I'm like, now I have a call every single day, and I have ADHD. And I asked a few of my friends, and they're like, do you have this problem with the meetings? And they're all like, no, except for those with ADHD, they do have issues with the meetings. And I'm like, now I have the same issue. Like, I can't stop thinking about a meeting. If I have a meeting, if I have even a podcast, I'll think about it the whole day, and then I cannot do anything. It's crazy. And for me, it's a big part of my business. So having whether it's like a discovery call, if you want to call it that, or a strategy call, or going through the strategy, or just like one-on-one meetings and seeing where we're at and showing the results. So it's like I can't have all of these meetings. So how do you say it nicely to people? Like, let's say people are now they're like, yeah, me too. I also need to have a full day for myself. And I need to have a day dedicated for meetings. That way my brain is like, okay, we're doing meetings today. And then the rest of the week is like, okay, we're doing full focus. We're, focusing on execution. How do I go about telling my clients who have been adding meetings and throughout the week, and you're like, now we're changing things up. We're only doing this day of the week.
Yeah, that's very difficult. When I had that, I switched to only doing meetings 2 days a week, probably last June. And it was, kind of a hard conversation at first with some people who wanted to meet on Wednesdays or Thursdays because I only have meetings on Mondays and Tuesdays now. But after we explained why and I talked to them about it, most of them really understood and it wasn't much of an issue. And then any client that I've brought on since, like that's just the norm for them, is that these are the days I'm available for meetings. And on my scheduler, I have all those days blocked off if I don't want to meet those days. So I don't even allow them the option to book those days. It looks like I'm already booked out. And there's really no conversation about it. It's like the options are Monday and Tuesday, and that's it.
Yeah, it's always easier with a new client, but the thing is,
Yes.
like, when you have the client that's been working with you for like a year or 2 years, and you're like, oh, we're changing things up now. It's like, oh, how do we do this?
Yeah, I think being honest with them is definitely very important. Just saying, "Hey, I need this for my mental space and my mental health, and like this is what I have to do moving forward." And I moved around about 5 meetings when I first started doing that, and all but one of them were able to work with me. So I think that just being honest about why you're doing it is the best way to handle it.
Yeah, and in the end, like if you think about it, it's also better for them too because if you have a better mental health, and that means you can also focus on their business better. That means you
Yes,
can do your job faster, be more time efficient, and that means that you can deliver better work. So it's a win-win.
exactly. Exactly.
Now, Sammy, I don't want to keep you here for long, and I don't want to keep the podcast super long. I think we're getting to the hour an hour about there. Before I leave, and before you leave, is there any question you would have liked me to ask you, or anything you want to close with?
I guess I would just say that it's always important to remember that when you're bringing on someone to work with you or when you're looking at time management and all of those things, it doesn't have to be perfect in order to work. And also, there's like nothing is set in stone. You can always change things. You're not failing if you have to change something to work for you. I know when I first started, and a lot of business owners that I work with have the mindset that if something doesn't work for them, then they failed because this is what so and so is doing and it works for them and their business is doing great. But that's just not how it works. Things aren't black and white. There are shades of gray. And you have to find what works for you, and it's okay to take time to do that.
I love that. I love that. I wouldn't change a thing. Thank you so much, Sammy. Now, where can people find you if they want to work with
I
you or if they just want to connect with you?
Yeah, I am on Threads mostly right now and trying to also get on LinkedIn, but I am on Instagram, but I'm moving more to LinkedIn, I think. I don't know what I'm doing, but still on Threads. And then I have my website, which is bohannonvirtualsolutions.com. And I also am on Facebook.
Great. Well, we're going to leave all the links below. Again, Sammy, thank you for being here. And for everyone listening, thank you for listening to our chat. I hope that you took a few tips. I definitely have, and I will be adding those to my list. So once I'm going through the podcast and editing, I'll be like taking down notes. So thank you so much, Sammy. Like it was really one of those podcasts when I'm like actually taking that notes. So thank you so much. And
That's
again, thank you
awesome.
for everyone listening.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.